Weight loss is actually a bad goal, and diet and exercise doesn't work because it doesn't optimize. It doesn't fix what's suboptimal in that part. And knowing that we have weight health hormones, they are the ones that regulate weight health, so they have to be working optimally. You never need to have a relationship with a weight health hormone replacement. You never need semaglutide or tirzepatide if you don't need it, but we all have to optimize these hormones if we want to achieve weight health. So to me, we've had the wrong goal. We've had the wrong approach. We have, the only people who have been successful is anyone who sold anything in the realm of the diet, trillion-dollar diet industry. And we have millions upon millions of people who feel like failures, whereas is actually that their body doesn't have what it needs to run better. It isn't working better on that part.
Most people are trying to lose weight, but very few have been taught how weight health actually works. My next guest says this distinction changes everything. Ashley Koff is a registered dietitian with more than 25 years of clinical experience and the author of Your Best Shot, where she explains why we've been stuck in a weight loss mindset instead of understanding the system that drives sustainable health. She's recognized as CNN's top 100 health makers and has been featured in style as Hollywood's leading dietitian.
There are 40 factors that impact our blood sugar. 10 of them are nutrition.
Oh my gosh.
Only one of those is carbohydrate, right? So your digestion, huge factor, is your body getting what it needs wherever it is. Hydration. If you are dehydrated, that is going to affect your blood sugar, and vice versa. Your blood sugar is going to create dehydration. So there are a lot of things for us to unpack in that space. So when we look at metabolic health, we want to look at it at the optimal level, not at the functional level. Most of the labs, lab ranges that are out there, and what we'll call the totals, like total cholesterol, total blood pressure, blood sugar, they're not giving us the picture underneath, that we really need to pay attention to.
Please join me in welcoming my friend, Ashley, to the show. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Taz. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to pause and say thank you. Your messages, your shares, your stories are the reason we make Whole Plus. Every conversation here is about connecting the science, the intuition, and everyday life together so you can feel more like yourself again. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe or follow button. It helps us reach more people who need this. All right, let's begin. All right, Ashley, I am thrilled to have you here. We go way back, and it's been so fun to watch, your journey through the years. But I am super curious, how did you land in the GLP-1 space? I know you're a registered RD. What landed you here? What are your thoughts about the GLP-1 craze? Let's just get into it.
Yeah, thank you. This is so fun. Okay, so 2004, probably just a little bit before I met you.
Yep.
I remember.
That's a long time ago.
I know, right? And I remember I was about 4 years old as a dietitian at that point. And I remember, and I was a super geek in terms of the body's physiology. We can unpack my own story later, and I do in my book. But it was really interesting because I had started working with bariatric patients. Mm-hmm. And first of all, my own ego as a dietitian was like, I think bariatrics is a bad idea. Like, I can help anyone lose 100 pounds.
I can understand that.
And I was like, and I did help people lose 100 pounds, but then I saw weight regain, or I saw challenges, and these sorts of things. And so when I saw bariatric patients, maybe after about 10 of them, I recall saying to the surgeon, this is just insane. Like, literally overnight, we're seeing diabetes change, or we're seeing, people's relationships with their satiety change. And one of them kind of flippantly said to me, yeah, it's the incretin effect. And I was like, what are you talking about, incretin effect? And all of a sudden, I went back, like there was no Google, so I had to like go and I went back and I'm like,
wait, was anybody using that word back then?
Incretin, right?
Incretin
and so
effect.
The only people that were using that word were people that were so deep in understanding the physiology of what was happening in the gut and understanding this. And really at that time, it was just sort of, it's the incretin effect. Well, for listeners, that GLP-1 and GIP, two hormones made in the lining of your digestive tract, are are called incretin hormones. They happen to be a part of many what I call now weight health hormones, because when I looked at those hormones and I started in 2004 to get to know them, and then started to get to know the medications that came out that are really just biosimilar hormone replacement therapy. So when I looked at that, I was like, wait a second. These hormones are the first domino in a line of what happens in our body. They tell insulin, a hormone that we know, to go to work. They tell leptin or ghrelin, hormones that we know, to go to work. Well, what we've since found out is that they actually regulate what I call a weight health ecosystem. So they help regulate fat, type, amount, location, muscle, bone, blood flow, because they're in the lining of our arterial wall. Yes, satiety. Yes, hydration. They're involved in inflammation. As a result, they're involved in cognitive function. Oh my goodness, they're involved like everything. So to me, when you know something, you can't unknow it. And up until then, I really thought that everything was about digestion. Well, this kind of cemented to me, yes, it's about digestion, but it's really about the system of these hormones, and are they working well enough?
Oh my gosh. So you have nailed a concept that even I have been talking about forever, that the gut is the foundation of your health. And whether we're talking about weight or brain health or hormone health or all these different things, that fundamental sort of Chinese Ayurvedic idea that the gut is ground zero applies to the GLP-1 conversation as well. All right. You said a lot of words there, and I want to tease them out because many people know GLP-1. No Ozempic, no Wegovy, no Manjaro. They know the names of the medication, but they're not understanding the kind of the underneath story. So when it comes to the incretin effect, there are multiple hormones involved, right? So how would you just define or describe incretin if you just had to define that word?
Yeah. So the incretin hormones actually only apply to, I believe, GLP-1 and GIP. And the effect was, hey, these actually regulate insulin and glucagon. What we now know, and let's back up and look at kind of like the big picture of the digestive
and where
tract.
leptin fits into this, where ghrelin.
Absolutely.
All of these hormones, by the way, guys, are playing together in the sandbox. So, when we're trying to think about overall health and metabolic health, we really want an understanding of all of it. So I'm going to let you go.
Yeah. So we know about a lot of hormones. We know about our sex hormones, which I think are, and other practitioners have said this, are sort of diminished when we just call them sex hormones. But when we talk about estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, we know about thyroid hormone. We know about insulin. For those, some people might be less familiar with leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is the hormone in our brain that actually, when it's activated, helps the brain give the message of you should feel full, you should feel satisfied. Ghrelin, we always learned, were like grrr. So it's the one that like stimulates hunger on that part. So what's interesting about leptin, what's interesting about insulin is these are actually peptide hormones. Well, it turns out we have a lot more peptide hormones, and they reside in our digestive tract. Why is the peptide part important? Because they are made from protein. So they're made from amino acids. So our other hormones are steroid hormones. They're made from fats. And then, as you mentioned, all of these hormones play together. So if you have a thyroid issue, you're going to have a leptin, ghrelin, sex hormone, and what I'm about to call weight health hormone issue. So these weight health hormones, GLP-1, to further confuse everyone listening, we actually do have GLP-2 and GLP-3, but GLP-1, GIP, PYY, CCK, amylin, oxymodulin, I could go on, okay? So the key thing for us to know, and this is really important, is they reside in cells in the lining of our digestive tract, in the lining, not inside the digestive tract, but in the lining. The second thing is they only go on for about 2 to 5 minutes, and then they're deactivated by an enzyme in the body. So why in the world would the body make something that goes on for 2 to 5 minutes that is so important and is in the lining of the digestive tract? Because they are solely a switch. They're a motion detector. So the idea is when you eat food, your body sends signals, and it sends signals from the brain to the gut, which is all the work you've been doing for years, and we know the gut-brain connection. So we come in and then it tells these hormones to go to work. And their entire job is to jump hopefully into an HOV lane and get where they're supposed to go. And they go and they tell these other hormones to go to work. That is it. That's all they're supposed to do. But if they are not going there on time, if there's not enough of them, if they get stuck in traffic, or if they just do not get deployed and sent out, then those other hormones don't get switched on.
So it's almost like a traffic jam.
It's like a traffic jam. So imagine that you go to get into your car, and let's pretend of cars of yesteryear, because I don't understand how electric cars work.
Right.
But let's say that there's gas in the tank, there's oil in the engine, there's air in the tires, and you get in your car and you turn it on and it just doesn't go. It's a spark plug issue. It is not is there sufficient nutrients, or that kind of thing. So one of the issues, and really why these medications were developed, is because for years we were trying to help people with diabetes address insulin challenges. Either you don't have insulin, so then we were able to replace it and say, we'll give you insulin. But what about an insulin resistance? Or what if insulin it was too slow, or it wasn't getting the message on time? And so they started to, first deal with just the insulin and what are, things like berberine, or what are medications, metformin and other that could help insulin. But they weren't seeing, and they even tried to, the enzyme that deactivates GLP-1 and GIP, they even tried to create medications to stop that from working. Those weren't as successful. So in about 2005, same year, Janet Jackson had a famous wardrobe malfunction, and Facebook
Wow, you're really
came.
dating all
yes,
of this
and
stuff.
Facebook came. It was the first year of Facebook, right? Okay, so this is the year I'm learning about this.
2005 is the first year of Facebook.
Yes. Okay, so this is the world that we're in, right? All of a sudden, we're connecting with people on the Facebook, right, or on the YouTube.
Right.
And at that moment in time, there was a medication that was designed like our own, but instead of staying on for 2 to 5 minutes, it actually stayed on for half of a day. So
What
it was
was
a
that
twice, it was Byetta, twice
Byetta,
daily
okay.
injection.
Okay.
Shortly after, we had liraglutide,
Yes.
once daily injection, solely for the purposes of helping diabetes work. And it worked on that part, or helping diabetics be able to have their insulin work. Then somewhere in there, after studying the venom of a Gila monster, they were able to, in scientific labs, create a synthetic hormone that stays on for 7 days. And that's your semaglutide, that's your tirzepatide, that's your retatrutide.
This is back in...
This is about 2000. When it came onto the market, this is more like 2012, 2015. So in that time period, you had liraglutide, and then we were seeing the development. So that whole time, I'm helping people optimize their own hormone. And I was like, oh, we can help you with your diabetes and your weight health just doing this without a medication.
Right.
But then I started to see patients on the medication, and I was like, oh, and they're solely on the medication for diabetes. But interesting things were happening. They were saying, like, I'm able to make different choices. I see myself having a reduction of what we now call food noise. We were also seeing some shifts in metabolic markers. And honestly, if my ego isn't here, truthfully, I just thought it was the work I was doing.
Right.
I was like, I got you on your omegas. I got you, like all this other stuff. So it took me understanding this whole system to say that what ends up happening when, instead of having your own hormones on for 2 to 5 minutes, you have them on for a week. So the receptor sites are satisfied and they're activated. You have these hormones fully activated all the time. That's a massive difference when it comes to appetite, when it comes to blood sugar, when it comes to inflammation, when it comes to blood flow. And that's what we're seeing with these medications.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I've got
So
a
much.
million questions. All right. Let's start with something that I, definitely when we think about overall health, I want to try to understand better. So if this sort of traffic jam is happening, right, where these GLP-1s, GLP-2, 3, and GIP are not able to do the work of getting to where they need to get to help us metabolize food and all that stuff better, why are we naturally not able to do that? What's going on there? Like, what is happening where that lining of the gut that contains these hormones is not doing the job it's supposed to do?
Yeah. So I think it's probably a handful of 5. And for many people, it's all those things. And for some people, it's one or a couple of them. For some people, it's a suppression of your own. Some people it's delayed. Some people it's dysfunctional. First of all, they're peptide hormones. If you don't take in enough protein, but also, and here's the kicker, if your protein isn't broken down and able to be broken into amino acids, and those amino acids don't get where they're supposed to go so they can be able to form these hormones. So if you have challenges in your digestion, you're taking a proton pump inhibitor, you have acid reflux, you are not chewing your food, your oral microbiome, your enzymes are lower, they're not breaking things down, you have microbiome issues, you have SIBO, you have, I mean, there's so many issues, right, that could be happening. So it could be your protein intake. It could also be your digestion. Now, the lining of the digestive tract, where the L cells and the K cells are, which is where these are housed and where they're supposed to get the signals, there are so many things about modern day that insults and injures the lining. It could be alcohol, it could be stress, it could be things that your body specifically finds intolerant to. So maybe it's gluten, maybe it's dairy, maybe it's exposure to toxins, maybe glyphosate and other things like that. And it might be that medications that you took for all the right reasons. Maybe you went through cancer treatment, maybe you went through hormone treatment. We know oral contraceptives. We know maybe you are somebody who has had pain and you've been using aspirin, acetaminophen, like other things like that. I think I mentioned alcohol in there.
Yeah, you did.
So there are a lot of things that can challenge the lining of the digestive tract. Now, on top of that, in the lining of the digestive tract, which I kind of always just thought was a tube that we just, we didn't want it damaged, but I didn't realize like it has so much metabolic activity in there.
The whole leaky gut metaphor.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
That many of us are just like, oh, it's just the cell.
It's just a
the
leakiness.
spaces are separating and it's just leaking.
Right.
Triggering inflammation.
And we now know that there could be an absence of keystone probiotics. So Akkermansia. So Akkermansia muciniphilia's job is to be in there. It's a probiotic. It chews up mucin and it repairs your lining of your digestive tract. So the mucin that's supposed to be there needs to be turned over. Well, it needs polyphenols. So it wants pomegranate and, other things to feed off of. And it also needs certain fibers being in there, right? So maybe I'm insufficient in what I'm taking in, or I don't have enough of these microbes, bifidobacteria, clostridiums. So then let's not talk about the digestive tract for a second, but let's recognize the highways. The highways are the vagus nerve and the bloodstream. So the easy one is the bloodstream. If the bloodstream is high in sugar and there's a stickiness, or maybe you're dehydrated so that things aren't flowing successfully, or maybe there's plaque, or maybe the highway is in other ways damaged, right? So if in that case, then things aren't going to be getting where they're supposed to go on time. But our vagus nerve, I think, is so interesting. So our vagus nerve runs from the brain to the gut, and it basically delivers those messages, and then it also takes those messages and takes them where they're supposed to go. So the vagus nerve, I think my friend Dr. Nawaz Habib has written one of the best books on this because he talks about 5 aspects of safety that the vagus nerve needs to feel. Could be biologically, so it could be nutrients that aren't in there. Could be that we're sitting too much or that we are not moving our midsection. Could be things like trauma. So it could be in the moment trauma. Maybe I'm really disturbed by the news that's going on, even though I have no control over it, right? Or it could be my lived experience. And maybe, so there's a variety of different things.
Interesting.
When we unpack all of this, I think it's pretty easy to understand. And I think there's an argument to say, I think the body is brilliantly designed. But if we were designed with something that stays on for 2 to 5 minutes, and I think that worked up until maybe until industrialization. I'm not sure that 2 to 5 minutes is enough in modern day with the amount of what I would like to say is if we're designed with a motion detector and modern day brings a stampede in front of a motion detector, maybe we actually need something that stays on for a little bit longer. I'm not sure that most of us need something that stays on for 7 days, but maybe we need to, at minimum, make sure it works for 2 to 5 minutes. Some people may need it where it stays on for, 3 to 4 hours or even up to 8 hours. And that's some of the work that I've been doing with patients.
That's fascinating. I want to spend one more second just around this idea of why it's happening. Are we noticing, for example, that stress is playing a role in it and, that cortisol is a part of this conversation as well? And then kind of to piggyback on that question, what can someone, we talk about leaky gut, we talk about the intestinal lining, what are some of the earliest warning signs, right? Before we get to medications and peptides and all these other things, what are one of the earliest warning signs that this gut lining is damaged? You need to sit up and pay attention. Otherwise, you might be on a tract where 2 years from now, 5 years from now, it's going to be belly fat and weight gain, food noise, and it kind of catches you by surprise.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, I think there's 3 ways we can unpack it. The first one is stress. Absolutely. So first of all, the body is designed with a stress response. So we do not say that stress is bad or just you need to reduce your stress. We need to recognize that elevated stress, the state of where stress is turned on at that elevated level, is awesome. Like if I'm really excited for this interview or like, if I'm a basketball player and I hone in on that part, but I have to turn it off, right? I have to make sure my body then goes into recovery. And in elevated stress, the body is burning through nutrients. It's also shifting attention away from digestion. So absolutely that is going to be a factor here. It could be burning through the amount of magnesium that you have because magnesium belongs inside the cells to turn off the stress response. It could also be slowing down or frankly stopping motility. And so as a result, things aren't getting where they're supposed to go. So turning off elevated stress and also learning to recognize the signals for you of when your body is in elevated stress is going to be important. The second one is every hormone in the body plays together. We do not have a cortisol or an adrenal conversation without having a sex hormone, without having a thyroid, without having a weight health hormone conversation, without having a vitamin D, which is a hormone conversation. So anyone that's just like, I think we have to say this because perimenopausal women and men exploring testosterone therapy right now and women with HRT, I feel like we're in an environment right now where HRT is being served up as the solution for everything.
Thank you for saying that. It's
and
like
it's
literally
just not
getting under my skin.
It isn't. It is part of optimization. But if you optimize, if you increase sex hormones and you only do that and you don't optimize gut or you don't optimize detoxification, you can actually worsen problems and not, improve them on that part. And your sex hormones and your weight health hormones are completely interdependent. So our hormones are all an ecosystem. And I think that's really key. So the what for me, because I wrote a book that is a playbook. Yes, I wanted people to understand the why, but I was really tired of people getting all of this information and then not actually having what they need to personalize. Right. So as a dietitian, people call me my niece and nephew do, but now other adults do, but they call me the backwards doctor. So instead of DR, I'm an RD. And I was like, so I'm going to focus on the how, you know what I mean? Like, so the how. Yeah. So in here, I give you an assessment to go through your digestive signals. I think it is really important for us to understand that is so much bigger than are you pooping or are you not pooping?
Okay,
now,
so this is really important. We want to make sure we get this. So there are digestive signals that are warning signs that we may be on the path to reducing or obliterating our own natural GLP-1.
Absolutely. And there are 5 components. Digestion is one of them. So that when we do assessment of weight health hormones, there are 5 components. Let's focus on digestion because it's the foundational one. All right. So if you're not pooping at all, that's a problem. Right. And this idea that like a couple times in the week could be regular, absolutely not. So we use a Bristol scale. So we look at the type of your poop. We look at the smell of your poop. We look at the ease with which you poop. And there, that certainly is going to be important. We also focus on your urine. We focus on elimination that way. And that's why I actually tie hydration into digestion. So if you are a hose and you're not a sponge, it means when you drink water, you're peeing it out. Or if you're peeing all day long or you're waking up in the middle of the night to pee, these are important signals for us on that part. It's not the color of your urine that tells us that. It is actually when you drink water, how long is it taking until you're peeing? And so then the other parts of digestive signals are things like how you smell. So I created the sniff test. Now, sometimes we're not honest enough with ourselves to do the sniff test. So I always say, like, get that really honest person. Like, has your breath changed? Has your underarm odor changed? Has your vaginal odor changed? How does your gas smell? Not just are you passing gas? Are things going in the wrong direction? If you have reflux, like that's an important thing for us to pay attention to. How is your skin? So a lot of times we conflate skin issues with sex hormone issues or thyroid issues. Like maybe my scalp is itchy, or maybe I have dry skin, or maybe I have bags, or maybe I notice changes or spots or things like this. All of this is actually signs of digestion
Chinese
on that
medicine
part.
called it.
100%. I kind of go between Ayurveda and Chinese
Both
medicine,
them,
and we have
right?
all of the tools that we need on that part. So when we look in that and we do that assessment, that is going to give us information about what we want to see adjust. Here's where the rubber meets the road. In modern day, we have created solutions, or what I will call band-aids, not true solutions, for just covering up all of those. So I also want to share with you, if you are someone who's regularly using mint mouthwash, it's not that I don't want you to brush your teeth. Your oral microbe, your hygiene is very important.
Right.
But if you notice that you're doing cover up a lot, that's going to be really important.
Sign,
yeah,
right.
I have a lot of people that tell me after coffee they have bad breath.
Right.
That's actually a sign. We need alkaline formers after we have something that acidic, right? So we go through all of those pieces and we can actually unpack what's going on. And I will say this, I go through this in the book, for anyone who has any suboptimal digestive function, it doesn't have to be dysfunction, it can be suboptimal, you will not have optimal weight health hormone function. Point blank right
end
there.
Of story.
That's the end of story. So that's why, to me, in my pizza analogy, it's going to be the crust for you. It's going to be the one that we have to focus on first.
I love that, emphasis on really that's where it begins. But let's move down the timeline a little bit. Another question, so many questions. One of the questions is, if we knew about GLP-1 medications back in 2012 or 2015, as you were saying, why are they the rage right now?
Yeah, totally. I think what happened is from diabetes to weight health, I think number one, I think it was 2019, they did a study, 9 in 10 Americans didn't meet the criteria for metabolic health. 9 in 10
That's
Americans.
ridiculous.
Okay, that was pre-COVID. I don't think we've gotten healthier metabolically. That criteria also only looked at metabolic syndrome. And you and I both know that that's probably subpar for assessing metabolic health.
Right.
And it actually doesn't ask any questions about digestion on that part. So that's number one. I think a whole series of things have happened. Number one, I think we've paid attention to metabolic health. We have continuous glucose monitors, and we have more evidence than ever that just trying to reduce your carbohydrate intake doesn't optimize your blood sugar.
Right.
So as people got more and more into how can I improve my blood sugar, I think there were more and more, quite frankly, medication, physicians, and sort of it went from becoming, sort of a just for diabetes out there to maybe I could try this in pre-diabetes, and it was helping people. We also have the introduction of peptides, and that's been really important. I was
going to bring that up.
Yeah, that's the biohacking community,
right.
And that's great. It suddenly became okay to shoot yourself up, right? Like we were like, instead of drugs, we're going to shoot ourselves up.
Pick your poison.
We have to understand that peptides, from an oral standpoint, until a new development recently happened, we actually could not take them orally because the heat of the stomach broke down the peptide, so we have to inject them. That's why they came out as injectables. The other piece of that, I think, as we've moved along, is people like our colleagues like Gabrielle Lyon, JJ Virgin, Stacey Sims, I think have really been out there on the front talking about body composition and moving us to this real, and this is really Gabrielle, muscle-centric medicine, and understanding that muscle is not, just like the tube of the digestive tract is not just like a nice to have, it's a foundational thing in our metabolic health, and it really dictates a lot of our metabolic health. I think all of these things led to a place where people were really feeling disempowered. I'm going to bring this back to a personal story for me. I was a weight, not health issue for the first 20 years of my life. I had a belly, and everybody in society triple stamped on it, and doctors told me, you don't have a health issue, you have a weight issue. You need to learn to manage it, and you need to diet and exercise differently.
So we got to dive into that too. I want to come back to that. Let me pause. That's super important.
Yeah.
But finish your thought before we
So
move
I think
into that.
all of those things really created a perfect storm, and then, drug companies were figuring out, quite honestly, they figured out how to, the patent on semaglutide and tirzepatide was not on the ingredient, it was on the injectable. So it was on this pen that you could inject. And so when that came about, it wasn't, we're going to sell vials of the medication, we're going to be able to patent this injection. The difference is, I don't think they were counting on compounding pharmacies being like, well, we can just sell somebody, their needles are already out there, and we can sell somebody a vial. Right. So, it's been a variety of different things. And certainly from 2015 to 2020, in my own practice, the explosion of from diabetes to people using this for weight health benefits was exponential. And then, of course, obviously Hollywood and influencers, caught up with it.
Caught on with it. Okay, now you've mentioned this a few times already. You've talked about, and I've heard you say it subtly and then clearly, you've talked a lot about weight health versus weight loss. Part of it is your own personal story. You talked about having a belly. I mean, I'll be 100% honest. My belly comes and goes. Totally. I've noticed it. You guys might notice it too. Yeah. But it's very tied and connected to cortisol and hydration, more so than calories in, calories out in my movement. So help us understand weight health versus weight loss, what we need to be thinking about there.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not unique in having had a weight issue and tried every diet under the sun. I think my uniqueness is I don't know anyone else who did a 7-day goat's milk only cleanse.
Oh my gosh.
That was my rock bottom. I was here in Manhattan.
7-day
40 ounces of goat's milk only.
Oh my gosh.
And this was pre-Whole Foods, so that was rough.
What year is this? Do you remember?
It was 1996.
Oh, God.
And when it worked beautifully for me for 10 days, for the 7 days, and then for a couple days after, I contemplated a life of just goat's milk. Because when you have battled your weight your whole life, and when you have tried, so let's acknowledge the myth of the non-compliant patient.
Yeah.
If one more physician out there says that these patients are looking for a quick fix or they just need to understand diet or exercise, let's all exhale. I just give them the middle finger. Like, that is not it. We have tried. We are so knowledgeable on nutrition. We have tried everything. And what has happened, and what thankfully happened to me, was at my failed cleanse, I went back to, I was actually not drinking. I was a macrobiotic vegan who did vinyasa yoga twice a day in Manhattan. I was 21 years of age, okay? And I didn't drink alcohol. When that all failed for me and the goat's milk cleanse for me, I did what every smart 22-year-old does, and I was belly up at a bar at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
God.
Yeah, after hot yoga. Don't ever do it. So I turned to a different worm. I was like, tequila, yeah, I'm here. And I'm telling my story, and these guys at the bar are laughing at me, and it's hysterical. Right. Well, this is that weird moment, life-changing. A gastroenterologist happened to be in the bar eating a burger and came over to me. And he says to me, "Have you ever been on antibiotics?" And drunk off my tushy, I turned to him and I'm like, "That is the weirdest pickup line I've ever heard." And he was like, "Oh, I'm not trying to pick you up." Yeah. And I was like, "Okay, noted." And then he said, "But I really think I can help you." And I was done with help at that point. I'm just like, it's not going to happen. Anyway, I did end up seeing him. My insurance paid for it. And he said to me, he never asked me about my weight. He said to me, just like if I came to you today, you would be asking me questions about my digestion. You would be asking me questions about my medication. So he was asking about that. He asked about oral contraceptives. He asked about my drinking alcohol. He asked about all these other things. And he said to me, it's not what you're eating or what you're drinking. Your body doesn't have what it needs to run better. Yeah. And that moment forever cemented in my life that weight and health are not separated. When I had my awakening in 2005, 2004, when I met GLP-1, I learned we actually have hormones, and that fully cemented it. Mm-hmm. But weight, our fat, our muscle, our bone, our water status in our body is a key performance indicator of our health. Here's the issue. It's not the only one. Our blood sugar, our poop, our sleep, our energy, our joy, there's so, our cholesterol, it's all related, right? So I came up with the term weight health to help people understand that the goal is actually different. Weight loss is actually a bad goal, and diet and exercise doesn't work because it doesn't optimize. It doesn't fix what's suboptimal in that part. And knowing that we have weight health hormones, they are the ones that regulate weight health. So they have to be working optimally. You never need to have a relationship with a weight health hormone replacement. You never need semaglutide or tirzepatide if you don't need it. But we all have to optimize these hormones if we want to achieve weight health. So to me, we've had the wrong goal. We've had the wrong approach. We have, the only people who have been successful is anyone who sold anything in the realm of the diet, $1 trillion diet diet industry. And we have millions upon millions of people who feel like failures, whereas is actually that their body isn't, doesn't have what it needs to run better. It isn't working better on that part.
So how would we measure, if we are going, because, as women, let's be honest, like if that dress doesn't fit, we are in a bad mood, right? So how do we realistically change our perspective and what we track and measure when it comes to weight health?
Yes.
Should we be getting on the scale?
Yeah.
Should we be getting on a body composition type tool? Should we be measuring our waist circumference? Let's just establish a standard. What is the best standard to understand where we are in the conversation around weight health?
So the most important thing is no to ever looking at total weight and defining it, using it as any marker of health. It doesn't tell me anything about your physical health, and it doesn't tell me anything about your value in the world. So if you have a number that you love, that we have to break up with. And look, ladies, it's hard. I love that you said that your belly comes and goes, because as somebody who personally has had that kind of trauma, the showing up of my belly and the lack of control over it at 48, I'm now 52, was mortifying. It was so challenging. It was, I literally hid in the mountains of
Maine.
I'm
someone who never had I was always bigger in the hips. That's our family story.
Yes.
But flat stomach. So now to deal with this
accordion
belly, it's like super frustrating.
Yes.
But, I think I finally figured it out. But
so the number on the scale, I remember even after, really following a plan and being like, this should work. I remember standing on the scale and I'm looking at the number and I'm going, okay, I'm actually pissed at this number and I was on a body composition scale but I'm still looking at the total number. And I was like, I've been strength training. I've been eating my protein. I got my creatine. I got all of that. And I had to give myself a good, I'm going to call it 3 minutes to unpack that I had gained muscle and lost fat and the number had stayed the same. But the number staying the same reminded me of going to Weight Watchers and being told to sit down without a high five or a hug. Because when the number stayed the same and you don't lose, you don't win. You're not a good person, right? So we have to work real hard on that one. Now, here's the flip side. I want you to see every aspect of your belly as a signal. So yes, we can measure weights to hip. Yes, we can look at our clothes. Yes, we can get on a bioelectrical impedance analysis scale that tells us muscle, fat, bone. I prefer when we look at pounds and we don't look at percentages, because the percentages don't really tell me the information that I need. We could use a DEXA. We can use, these days, you can scan with your phone. You can use a tape measure. I mean, there are so many things that we can look at. Yes, I want to understand if that belly, if it's actual real gain or also if it's gas or bloating. So if you notice times of day that's occurring, but we also want to pay attention to our hair. We also want to pay attention to our nails. We also want to pay attention to our sleep. We want to pay attention to our body temperature. We want to pay attention to, am I interested in sex or not, and these other signals. So when we start to put it in the context of all signals, we can actually understand it a lot better.
Fascinating. So it's really, should women get on the scale then?
Not for the total number.
To do?
I tend to use once a week. And it also depends a little bit on your background in that part, because for some people, just even getting on a BIA scale is too traumatic based on their experience with scales. Sometimes I have people just literally have their phone and the Bluetooth on and they have that data, and that data comes over to me and they don't look at it. But I like once a week on waking, nude, after you've gone to the bathroom. I actually don't like you using a scale at the gym or at the longevity center that you're going to, or at the doctor's office, because what's happened in the day is going to dictate. I was just with this beautiful, beautiful woman. I was giving a talk at a longevity clinic, and she was like, I cannot believe it. My visceral fat is 12. And everybody's like looking at, and she's tiny, right? And we're like, no, it's not, and then I'm like, well, maybe it is. And this is a really important signal. And I'm not sure, what this is. And then like an hour, I think an hour and a half, now at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, she got back on it and she's like, oh, now it's an 8. And I was like, so what have we proven, right? And so I was like, did you poop? Have you digested your food? Did you happen to have had it before? And it turns out before she had had a sparkling water, she had eaten, and also she was really stressed because she was trying to get everything done before the event, got on there. And then the event happened. Maybe she moved her bowels. I mean, who knows on that part? I was like, I don't know if it was how you were standing, whatever. I said, I don't care. But you've proven my point. Let's not get on this scale on repeat. Let's have the same time. Ideally, it's one day a week. And then the other part for women is to know that wherever you are in your hormonal shift. So in perimenopause, our hormones show up differently every minute of every day, right? So just know that we may see fluctuations. My job as your practitioner is to unpack that and to have this information tell us a story of where we want to look rather than judge you as a person or judge what it is that you're doing.
I mean, I think that's going to be so comforting to women. And I would remind them too, just as somebody who's been through this and been through it with patients, like on that estrogen uptick, we are heavier.
Yes.
And there's more fluid typically.
Yes.
So you need to pay attention to that. And then on that estrogen downturn and kind of the progesterone uptick, things are a little bit better.
Yeah.
But if you're imbalanced, you experience it all throughout the month and all throughout your cycle. And for those of you on HRT, it's the same thing. 100%. Like if you get puffy with HRT, that is hormonally based, and you need to look at your HRT regimen and it's the gut and the liver and all these other things. Because I love that you say it's an ecosystem. I think that's so important.
So we still measure it while we're onboarding HRT or while we're adjusting it, but we have to factor in, we measure it to gather data, not to judge you as a person or judge your compliance, if you will. Yeah.
So you talked a lot. So this idea of weight health, which I love, by the way. But you also, like, in conjunction with weight health is our metabolic health, right? And you also talked about how we are not, latching on to metabolic health until you're pre-diabetic or diabetic or have like super high cholesterol or high blood pressure. So help us all understand, how can we latch on to what our metabolic health is doing as we are contemplating the role of GLP-1, and I know we're going to get more into the GLP-1 medications in just a minute, but like, what is that differentiator between suboptimal metabolic health and the signs and symptoms versus, having actually a disease state when it comes to metabolic health?
And I incorporate in assessment of metabolic health as part of an overall assessment of weight health and your weight health hormones. And I created, and it's in my book, it's free online. It is a clinical tool, but I created it to assess our weight health hormone function because I was like, we need to be able to see what's going on in this whole space. So the metabolic health part of it is understanding your breathing and your blood pressure, and maybe even looking at heart rate variability. And then when we look at the other aspects of metabolic health, blood sugar really is an important one for us to look at in a different way. Look, you and I practiced when we had finger pricks and we understood in the moment blood glucose, right? And we're like, well, that's helpful it's certainly super helpful for diabetes, especially in a type 1 diabetic. But it's actually not helpful for us if we want to see trends. And then we got very excited that A1C came out, and A1C was this 90-day average. The problem with an average is it doesn't tell me, like, there are all these different ways. So you could have rolling hills at a higher level, and that could give me the same results as peaks and valleys at a lower level. And we come in, and what we're missing is what's the story of your blood sugar. So that's where continuous glucose monitoring has been really helpful for us, if that's accessible. And I really like to use it in that way. And one of the things that we might use things also like looking at your triglycerides. We might also look at fasting insulin. We might look at C-peptide. So it kind of depends on how we want to unpack blood sugar on that piece. What we want to recognize is that even in regular non-pre-diabetic, so I've had people where their A1C is 5.4, 5.0, and I take a look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got peaks and valleys. And by the way, high blood sugar, this is the other one, because I think that there are a lot of people out there that are trying to have us go for something that is not sustainable but also isn't better for our overall health. We are not meant to have low flat blood sugar. Like we are not meant to exist at 80 or at 70 on that part. We want to have spikes in our blood sugar. When you really stress your body out, like with a great high intensity workout, you're going to see your blood sugar rise. We then want to see it come down, right? So what we want to do is actually have those rolling hills occur in a way that we understand, and we can understand the impact of all your choices. So one of the things that I share in my book and with my patients is there are 40 factors that impact our blood sugar. 10 of them are nutrition.
Oh my gosh.
Only one of those is carbohydrate, right? So your digestion, huge factor, is your body getting what it needs wherever it is. Hydration. If you are dehydrated, that is going to affect your blood sugar, and vice versa. Your blood sugar is going to create dehydration. So there are a lot of things for us to unpack in that space. So when we look at metabolic health, we want to look at it at the optimal level, not at the functional level. The most of the labs, the lab ranges that are out there, and the what we'll call the totals, like total cholesterol, total blood pressure, total blood sugar, all of these others, they're not total weight. They're not giving us the picture underneath, that we really need to pay attention to. So better labs is going to be better. I look at things like AST and ALT.
Yes.
I want us to look at ApoB, not just at LDL. Like all of these sound like alphabet soup to people, but it's also why I think clinical interpretation is so important in this. So important.
This is, I've argued this already. Like we can't have AI doctors. You can't have protocols that are spit out without knowing the whole picture.
Underneath,
fasting insulin, low
Yes.
HDL, high LDL,
Right.
ApoB, A1C as a reference point, but if it's normal, it doesn't mean you
That's
get a
right.
free pass. So a lot of times people are told their labs are normal.
Right.
They're not really normal. They're just not in depth.
Yeah.
And we need to go deeper
Yes.
to understand
Yes.
the picture there.
Or the really, I call our RDAs really dumb amounts. Like,
Right.
so, somebody's turning
love
around
that.
and is saying
Really?
like, oh, the RDA for magnesium is from 1997 based on an 135-pound woman and a 166-pound man. And it makes the assumption based on gender and weight that men need 20% more magnesium than women. And we just talk about like one uterine contraction, right? Like one premenstrual time period
Right.
where your muscles are tight and you need magnesium to be
Right.
able to relax it. We're not looking for more favor for women. We're just looking for equal, on that part.
We're looking for
It's
equal, and
so
it's also why
suboptimal.
Women and men and children, everyone, if you've got a family, you're dealing with everyone.
Yeah.
You can no longer subscribe to the theory that if you're eating healthy, you're getting all the nutrients
That's right.
that you need. I know so many doctors tell patients that it's simply not true anymore.
Facts. Yeah.
Because the RDAs are not where they're supposed to be for this modern time.
Yes.
Bottom line.
And because if digestion is at all suboptimal, which let's just establish facts,
Right.
our digestion is going to be suboptimal more than it's going to be optimal in modern day with everything that impacts it
Right.
and with our choices of healthy living as well as challenges. That means that we can't give credit to food for being healthy. The body gives credit to nutrients when they get where they're needed and it can use them.
Right.
So we have to stop saying like, oh, wild salmon is a source of this, and as a result, it's a healthy food. When you eat this is what's going to happen in your body.
Right.
Not if digestion is suboptimal.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. All right. Let's wind our way back to these GLP-1 medications because, of course, in the context of a holistic plan, there is a role for them. There is a place for them.
Yeah.
So, and Give It Your Best Shot, which
Yes.
is the book that is sitting here, which is incredible and so timely, I think. What has been your experience with these GLP-1 medications? What is the right use of them? Where does microdosing fit in?
Sure.
Because we've been doing a lot of that. I would just love to hear your perspective on all of
Sure.
that.
So they are biosimilar weight health hormone replacements. So we have our own hormones and we can replace them. So just like estrogen or just like insulin. But those hormones, estrogen and insulin, are bioidentical.
Right.
These are biosimilar.
Okay.
The dissimilarity is they stay on for 1 to 7 days, whether you're taking the oral or the injectable, instead of 2 to 5 minutes. So I want us to think about if I consume a teaspoon of sugar versus if I have a packet of Splenda, as an example. So Splenda is a non-nutritive sweetener. It's thousands of times sweeter than our own. So it may give us this opportunity to get a high level of sweetness, but it also and not take in calories, but it's going to give us so much more intensity, and it may also alter the microbiome. That is exactly what's happening with these medications. So what happens with these medications when they work exactly as they are supposed to work? So this is not an aha, a surprise, or a side effect. They stay on for 7 days. That means you're metabolically active more often than you're at rest. That can create fatigue. It can create challenges with recovery in the body and the body not turning off. Now, on the positive side, it can also mean that we're suppressing appetite,
Right.
we're suppressing hunger. But if we suppress appetite and hunger too much,
lower
you might
your
also
metabolic
not eat during the day. You might not resource your body well enough. And you might also backload, and that could also affect affect your sleep. So one of the things I'm seeing as side effects from the medication is that people who maybe already had suboptimal sleep and suboptimal recovery are experiencing more of that. What happens when that occurs? You're not as interested in working out, or your workouts aren't as effective. You lose muscle, you lose hair, your other hormones in your body are dysregulated. The other component of these medications is the way that they work. This is not an aha or a surprise, is they delay gastric emptying.
Right.
If digestion is already suboptimal, it's going to exacerbate that.
Yeah.
If you're not pooping, it's going to be worse.
Right.
If you have reflux, it's going to be worse. And if you are doing all of this and you're getting a hormone that goes right to the receptor sites instead of your body have to triggering it and releasing it and deploying it and having it travel where it's supposed to go, your own hormones are getting suppressed. So if you don't fix what's going on underneath, or you just try to come off the medication, you are not going to be able to. So when we look at all of that, we understand how it's working.
Screaming this,
right? It's so
you have to have a
dumb
holistic
for
approach.
people to be saying this, like, oh my gosh, and blaming the medication.
Right.
First of all, any blame of these medications is completely about weight loss, weight bias that exists in this country, because every medication, a statin, which interferes with cholesterol formation, also interferes with testosterone, also interferes with erectile dysfunction or testosterone in women, and a whole bunch of factors, and is also going to be a factor in your iron and everything else. So if we look at every medication, it's going to have pros and considerations. All right. The dose is going to matter, and the dose is going to be important because at higher levels, you're going to have this occurring at a greater intensity, right? Instead of 1 packet of Splenda, if I use 4 packets of Splenda, I'm going to have more microbiome disruption, or I'm going to have more high exacerbation of my sweet taste buds, and regular fruit isn't going to taste sweet, et cetera, on that part. So one of the reasons microdosing has become popular is because it's actually not microdosing. It is just a low dose of the medication. We like the term microdose because low dose and microdose feel differently in a world that still hasn't reconciled how we feel about weight loss. So what I want to be clear about there is that a true microdose is actually going to be a microscopic amount of this medication.
Okay, where are you on this?
Yeah, I'm going to be real clear.
Yeah.
A microscopic amount of a peptide doesn't actually create enough suppression in the appetite and hunger and in the doesn't stimulate the insulin. So it's not going to have that. And by the way, do not credit me on this. This is Dr. Tina Moore's work and other people who very early on were saying, we understand how microdosing of peptides work.
Yeah.
Microdosing of peptides is like using a homeopathic remedy.
Yep.
You use a small amount of something to maybe potentially trigger a reaction. That's not what's happening here. Now, a low dose, super effective. A low dose could be that you use a small amount on a weekly basis. It could be that you use maybe even a little bit more, but you extend it over a period of time. I'm using it in so many different ways with patients.
Exactly the same.
And I have people that have been off of the medication that come back on and need it. I have people that are staying on their same dose at a low dose and have come off of other medications. And I have people that we have gone up on higher doses as I'm optimizing their system along the way. And then we hit a place. And if we ever hit a place where somebody doesn't feel hunger, where somebody is losing muscle with fat, where somebody's digestion is too negatively impaired, then I turn around, I'm like, we got to pull back, on that part. So what's interesting is, as a dietitian, I am not meant to dose or prescribe or do any of this. Why am I doing all of this? It's because people are going online and buying the medications and they're getting it themselves. So what I am doing is I'm educating and I'm saying, for consideration, here are the adjustments that I would recommend. And I'm also training, I have a training program, a certification. I'm also training dietitians and physicians, nurses, like everybody on how to do this better. The key takeaway in all of this is, whether you're on an agonist or not, you need a playbook for optimizing your weight health hormones, because we don't get to choose that piece. If you are on an agonist and having any benefit, if you lose a pound, if your blood sugar improves remotely, if for the first time in your life, like Oprah, who did it at 8 a.m. and by 2 p.m. she's like, I feel like I have a different brain, like my food noise is different, you have proven my thesis that your own weight health hormones were suboptimal. So we know you need to repair your own function on that part. Whether you can repair it so that you can come off of it, I don't have a crystal ball in your life. And that's not really the point. The point is to figure out how we optimize your health, whatever medication we use.
I mean, you and I are so on the same
Yeah,
page
of
with this
course.
one, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
of
I've been
course.
talking about, like, I don't want to think about any medication or anything as all good or all bad.
Yeah.
But it has to be personalized.
Right.
And it has to be sort of titrated to you. And the
Yes.
problem I think that I have with people going and ordering whatever they want and doing whatever they want is they have nobody to like wind this stuff together for them into an approach or into a plan
Right.
that is very linear, very strategic with like, okay, this is where you are at this moment. This is the dose we're going to do right now. But we got to work on gut health. We've got to work on your steroid hormones like your estrogen and progesterone and all those other things, testosterone. We have to work on your nutrients and your cellular health. We have to work on cortisol. We have to work on all of it so that a pharmaceutical is not a pharmaceutical for life.
Right.
I think that
well,
is
it could be. So
it
like
could be.
It could be. So let's talk about personal responsibility because I think that that's the other one that gets thrown around a lot in here. Again, because we're in the land of weight bias on this part.
Right.
If those people would just do X, right? Is kind of on that part. So personal responsibility. Here are the things that you as a human are responsible for. Number one, if you buy anything and believe that one thing, whether it's a medication, a food, a supplement, or even my book, like if you believe that something alone is a solution and you don't invest in personalizing your own and recognizing that optimization is not just I figured out a plan and I'm going to stay with that plan forever. It's ongoing. You need a whole solution. So the reason I say not even just my book, because in my book on page 9, there is a QR code and that QR code brings you over to a program for how to personalize it and gives you access to human coaches because I was like, okay, you still are going to have questions for your personalization.
100%.
So we put all of that together as a system, and that's why I claim, on the book that part. So you cannot buy the medication as a solution. Now, here's the other part. Society and our healthcare system, our government and our insurance, you are responsible. So insurance, you are a huge part of the problem. You do not make my services in the preventative health way available and reimbursable. You don't make your services reimbursable in the way that it needs to be. You don't mandate that for somebody to have access to this medication, instead of making the mandate being your BMI or your blood sugar, why isn't it actually that you need to see a doctor and a dietitian and they agree together and that's how you get your prescription? That's what we did in bariatric surgery, on that part.
You need a holistic
You
approach,
need a holistic,
which is not covered by insurance.
Absolutely.
And then leaves responsibility, excessive responsibility, I think, on the part of a consumer or a patient.
Well, and let's talk about government blame here.
Right,
So the government's to blame with the wrong guidelines and the wrong, and then they're just saying, let's make access to this medication cheaper.
Right.
So I am all for access to medication being affordable and accessible for everyone on that part. But if you don't make it accessible to us, then there is going to be that piece. So I actually am not arguing against the places, like I don't love it, but I think, the places online that people are selling, that companies are selling the product. But I do think that they're creating a problem because they're saying that they see a physician. So if you see a physician only for your prescription, that's the problem.
That's the problem.
You need to be seeing somebody for the management. And I also will say that I don't think you should see a doctor for the management. I think you should see a qualified dietitian, and the doctor and the dietitian collaborate on that part. Because you know me, I'm going to get into the weeds on this, and you're going to be like, and you're going to know all the questions to ask because you diagnose and you prescribe and you do that as part of your investigation. You're not going to spend an hour with somebody figuring out like how are we going to meet your iron needs or how are we, you might personally, but most practitioners, aren't going to
do that.
So I think in that, and we also have to recognize that total nutrition is your food and your supplements, understanding that whole piece, and we need that to be optimal. So when we look at this, we're just in a messy, bad situation. And when we look at the fact that medications are now becoming accessible for individuals as young as age 10, and we also look at highly problematic outcomes in those over 60 and people coming off of the medication after 3 or 6 months because of the side effects, what we're seeing is not that the medication should be blamed, but the system around the medication should be blamed.
You have an advocate right by your side on that one.
Yeah, we'll preach together.
We'll preach together.
That's
I mean, my mission and the mission of Whole Plus has always been to change how we think about medicine, deliver medicine. and we don't choose the easy way.
No.
Because personalization, if you're truly going to be the advocate for the patient, personalization is the doctor-patient, nutrition patient, it's having that person by your side to guide you. I think it's too much to tell people, okay, we want you to take care of your gut health, your liver health, your hormone health, and then understand where your medications go in this equation, and then understand how to supplement all by yourself. Yeah. Good luck with that,
Neither you or I do it on our own.
No.
Like, I see a you see a me.
Yep,
100%, just in all of these spaces. And so I just think that, to your point, it's like this idea of how we actually help our bodies become optimal, and we maintain that optimization, or we, anytime there's something suboptimally functioning, we work towards optimization, is an ongoing process, and it needs to be a part of our jobs, but it can't be our own day job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you wrote a book.
Yeah.
Give it, what's the exact title?
Your Best Shot, the personalized
I keep saying
system.
give it your best shot.
That's right. Yeah, I know, right?
So you wrote Your Best
Shot.
Shot.
A lot of Pat Benatar. Yeah.
We've got a lot going on out there with low dosing and microdosing and standard dosing. What do you want people to take away?
Yeah, thank you.
With them in this book.
I think the key piece about this book is we need to meet our weight health hormones. You need to have the awakening that I had in 2004. We need to break up with weight loss and weight management as goals, as tools. Diet and exercise, absolutely, they're important, but they have to be personalized in a context of a system that is able to optimally function, to operate successfully. So I put a playbook together for it. This isn't the book to learn everything under the sun about these actual medications. This is the book to understand, if I'm on the medication, how do I optimize my health? Or if I'm not using the medication, how do I optimize my health? Really through the lens of weight health on that part.
That's incredible. And where can people find your book?
Well, hopefully they find it everywhere. I like to flip it and say, if you can't find my book, let me know. But otherwise, Your Best Shot should be everywhere. And I read my own audio book. I do tell people to buy the hard copy, just because I think you're going to want something that you can mark up and, that kind of thing. But don't forget to opt in for that QR code when you get on there, so that you can get the access to my coaches, who are amazing, and additional clinical tools. And also, we're trying to update, as an example, I wrote this with a nod to the oral medications, but now there's a whole new type of medications that are coming out.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that they are actually not biosimilar weight health hormones. So I'll be back for a part 2 on this. We really have to pay attention to where.
So you're talking about the retatrutide?
Not a retatrutide. That one still is, and oral still is. I'm talking about orforglipron, and there's new medications called small molecule non-peptide. And they're coming out right now, and they are non-peptide. So they're not biosimilar. They still go to the receptor site in your body, and unfortunately, they're still being called GLP-1 agonists. This is going to be really confusing, and I think that my work right now is as much with medical practitioners to understand, and my Substack, I'm always unpacking it here, here are the things, and I always just am curious, I'm not saying, again, I don't think that these are going to be bad for us medications. I just think they're going to have very different considerations for us to understand, and probably different pros in terms of application.
Oh my gosh. I was about to ask you too, what is the future of these medications?
Scary. It's really scary. Also because it's kind of cool and it's scary. We are learning in real time about how the body is designed. So most people don't know about amylin or I can't even pronounce it, but oxynomodulin, and these other peptide hormones. And yet we're now going to be agonisting them. So I think that's really important, because I don't know, as a random example, and this is not true, but I'm just going to hypothesize. I don't know if when you take a statin, does it affect your amylin? And if I don't know that, and I now put you on a medication that is agonisting your amylin, which is encouraging it to work and work at a much, much higher intensity, right, in terms of staying on, what that means for your thyroid medication, or what it means for your statin medication. Yeah. So I think one of the things that has to happen for clinicians is for us to move from the space of, I have a right answer, or I even know what the side effects might be, to I am going to have to be curious and use every patient as an N of one and understand that. And that's a really difficult place.
Hard.
It's hard with the kind of medicine that you practice. It's hard. The kind of nutrition that I practice, it's hard. For the traditional medical system that allows for a 15-minute visit,
impossible.
2 years, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Every year.
It's impossible.
These annual visits are an absolute disaster in that space. So that's a tough place for us all to be.
Right.
I don't like to be I'm never going to end on something negative. That is concerning. Let's talk about the greatest potential and where I'm really optimistic. With the tools and the awareness that we have, I really believe we can understand how to optimize our weight health. And I believe that as we help adults, children, young adults, everybody be able to optimize our weight health, GLP-1 agonist or not, I think we can create generational weight health, and we may see a greater need and use of these medications today, but we may actually set up more successful pregnancies and health and really be able to reverse which is what I see as like the most concerning part, which is the early onset of so much of this dysfunction. And if we can do that, we improve and we create generational weight health. So I am super excited. I love the work that we all are doing. You know, I'm like tripling down on it. But I think that we just have to do it in a very cautious and in a different kind of way.
Well, that is definitely a more promising, optimistic.
Right. We got to land there. I was like, I feel like you and I, otherwise our bellies will be back there from stress.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Cortisol's going to be right back out again.
Totally.
Well, I love the work you've done over all the years. I know we track and follow each other, and I'm just so proud of you, and I'm proud of this book and all the science that you've brought to this equation, because I think we talk a lot about metabolism and weight and all this other stuff, but not really with the understanding that these are, I mean, this was learning for me today, that these are biosimilar hormones, essentially. So they're a part of the hormone conversation and the hormone ecosystem. So I think that's incredible. All right, before I let you go, I asked this question to everyone. What makes you whole?
You know, moments like this, I think that when I get to fulfill my life purpose, which I really do believe now is helping people to understand how to optimize their weight health, I feel more whole. And there's a selfish component to that. I'm repairing some of the not wholeness that I felt in my childhood, and really being able to say, I'm sorry that you as a young girl went through those experiences and felt so disempowered, but now I'm not only empowered, I'm empowering others. So I think it's a big one.
That's incredible. I think so many people do grow up with this feeling when they don't fit a certain stereotype or certain ideal. And I think if you can help repair some of that with the understanding of the chemistry behind it, that's powerful, powerful work. Where can everyone find you?
Well, hopefully, again, if you Google my name, hopefully it's me. Like that, you know, I at some point I'll worry about
find
that.
A fake
but
account about me.
Me too. Every day I get somebody's trying to log into a fake Instagram. But theoretically, it's me. It's certainly me if you find the curly hair on that part.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Ashley.
Thanks
this has
for
been
having
a
me.
joy. Thank you, everyone else, for watching and listening to this episode of Whole Plus. We will see you guys next time. Before you go, remember, healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. If today's episode gave you one of those moments, subscribe and keep learning with me. The next video is right here, and it picks up right where this one left off.